Hey guys, welcome. Sometimes I'm asked about sessions and what playing sessions are like, and what to bring on a session. I'm going to talk a couple. I'll do a couple of videos. I'll talk about my pedal board a little bit, and I'll talk about how to prepare for a session. But in this one, I just like to talk about what to bring to a session. It's a very important thing, especially if you're a young player who's really trying to get into the session scene. I've had the opportunity over my career. I'm not a session guy, so I don't do I'm not 24/7 in the studio or anything like that, but I've had the opportunity to do hundreds of sessions over my career. They have been some of the most fun and exciting and creative experiences I've had. I really love doing sessions. They bring me a lot of fulfillment, and I get to work with a lot of great artists and a lot of great people who hire me in, but also great musicians that are hired in with it. So that's always a lot of fun for me. So talking about what to bring to prepare for a session. First of all, preparation, I'll do that video another time, but I'd say for sessions in general, there's two different types of sessions you have to think about. Number one is a band that you work with. And that's the band that you know the music, you know the guys, you've been playing the music for a long time, you're used to the music. You sort of know what you want to get out of the session and the sounds that you want to get. The second one is a hired gun session, and that's where you don't really know the artist. Now, when I first started doing sessions, I think I was doing more band stuff where I was with a band and I would record, and that was always very exciting for me, first time going in and stuff. As it went on, I became much more of a hired gun type of artist. So, I would somebody would call me because they wanted me on their record, and I would go in and play for them, which was really a lot of fun too. And it's interesting that way because you get to do a lot artistically and stylistically that maybe you don't normally get. I've done jazz sessions and country sessions and rock sessions and heavy rock sessions and pop sessions. I've done, sort of newgrass sessions and all kinds of different things that have been a lot of fun for me to be a part of. But a lot of times when you're hired in, you don't really know the artist. Nowadays, more often than not, when I do a session for somebody I don't know, like yesterday I did a session and I didn't know the artist at all. And all I got was like an MP3 with some of the songs. Sometimes it's their demo, sometimes it's artists that they're covering. So you don't really know what you're going into. So the primary difference between band sessions and hired gun sessions is the quickness in which you need to respond. If you're in a band, you sort of know what you're doing. You know what you're gonna, what types of sounds you're trying to get. It's more a matter of capturing those sounds that you have in your head, getting them onto record. For a hired gun session, you have to be quick on your feet because you're never quite sure where the session's going to go and what's going to happen. Especially if you're not doing a dub session. Now again, a lot of times I'll get called in for a dub session where the stuff's done and they just need some additional guitars on stuff. But a lot of times you walk in and you're working with other musicians, and it's an organic process. It's very creative and very fun. But one of the things that needs to happen as you start to hear different things is you need to be able to access sounds quickly. Now, what that means is, like I have a rig, the normal rig that I use, not for sessions, but my live rig is a program rig. So I've got Strymon pedals and stuff, and I've got to go in and program stuff, and I program my patches. And then when I do live shows, I just sort of click through the sounds to get my sounds. In a session, it's not that way at all. You need to be able to, I was on the session and I played some rhythm guitar parts. They were pretty crunchy. Went to take a solo, which was also pretty crunchy, and the guy who was producing the session got on and said, his name was Hollis Greathouse, really Grammy Award-winning engineer and really great musician and great friend. But he said, "Hey, your sound's getting lost because of your other sounds were so crunchy. Can you clean up your sound?" So I needed to be able to go through. In this case, I cleaned up my rhythm sounds a little bit, but I needed to quickly tweak my sounds with both delays and reverbs and amount of gain. So I couldn't have something where I'm programming because everybody's waiting and the clock is ticking. So you have to be fast moving on a session. All right, so when I go in, first of all, when I get a session, I've done sessions where I walk in dry and I've never heard the music before, and you've got to just quickly access stuff. More often than not, as I said, though, you get some MP3s or something, so you get to work with the stuff. But also what I like to do is I like to ask the artist what artist they're listening to or who they want their music to sound like. So if it's Keith Urban or if it's Green Day or if it's Justin Bieber or whoever it is that they want their sounds to sound like, then a lot of times I'll do my homework and I'll listen to those artists because it's always good to learn and grow and listen. I'll listen to those artists and try to figure out what their guitar players are using. And then it determines my amp choices and my guitar choices and a lot of stuff like that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, but there's a couple things that you need to bring for every session, no matter what. And these are the things. Always have a tuner. Now, the reason I say that is a lot of other instruments, like bass or single note instruments, they can retune, but on guitar, you are stuck. They can't really retune you well with any of the software. So if you're out of tune, you go down to tape out of tune. And I've actually had that happen before when I listened back to a recording and I say, oh no, my G string was a little out of tune or something on a printed record. And you'll hear that on the radio sometimes too with stuff, especially older sessions where guys are a little bit out of tune. So you don't want that to happen. And incidentally, I'll talk about what to do on a session, but I tune between every take. I'm really conscientious about always tuning between stuff because I don't want my stuff to be printed onto tape out of tune. All right, so I bring a tuner. I always bring extra strings. You need an extra set of strings, a full set of strings, and if you have a string that breaks more consistently, like an E string or something, always bring it. I remember one of the very first sessions that I did as like a hired gun type of guy, I was with a guy named Nathan Davis. He's a jazz legend, has played with the best jazz musicians in the world. I think he took John Coltrane's place in his band when John Coltrane died and played with the who's who of jazz. So this guy was a real heavyweight. And I was 19 or 20 or something like that, and he hired me for this session to come in. And I was scared because all of the musicians were better musicians than me. He heard me playing like this synth guitar that I had, and he wanted some of that on it. So I brought that guitar, which was a mistake, first of all, not to bring the gear that I wanted. I should have brought that, but also my normal gear. But I also went to do the session, and I broke my high E string, and I didn't have a high E string. I only had a B string, and I put a B string on and had to play the whole session. Now, they never knew that I put a B string on. I got through the session and I survived, but man, I'll tell you, I was sweating through this thing. It was one of the hardest sessions I ever did, but I walked away from that saying, never again. I will never, ever, ever make that mistake again. So always have some extra strings, always have some extra cables, short cables for your pedals, long cables for your connections. Make sure that they're good cables, and also the cables that you have, make sure that they're good. Cables go bad, so stuff happens. But make sure that if you get some crunchiness or some sounds that you don't like, that you're able to swap out a pedal or a cable very shortly. Make sure that you put new strings on your instruments and intonate your instrument. If you're playing up high on the neck, you need your intonation to be good and you want your strings to be new. I normally don't like brand new strings because they have a tendency to go out of tune a little bit. If you stretch them right, they normally don't too bad, but at least have a day or two of bending on it. Also, something about strings, when you have you've bent on them a little bit, they seem to stretch a little bit better. You get a little bit less like strings popping out from under you and stuff like that. You're going to bring a pedal board and whatever pedals are necessary. You're going to bring an amp, of course, and you're going to bring guitars. That sounds logical, but I did get on it wasn't a session, but I remember once going to a really important audition rehearsal, and I had all my gear. I had a trunk full of gear, and I got there to the thing with all these guys that I really wanted to land this gig, and I had forgotten my guitar. I had to play a bad acoustic guitar for this. So don't make that mistake. Make a list, check it twice, make sure that you have all the stuff that you need. All right, now the right gear for the session. This is really important. So different sessions. Now you might not be doing sessions where you're stretching out and doing music that you're not used to, but different sessions have different requirements. So for instance, if I'm on a country session, I know I need a compressor. I know I need a very clean amp, like a good old Fender Vibrolux or something like that, or Deluxe. I'll need a telly on the thing. I'll probably need an acoustic. Maybe I'll need a dobro or something like that. For modern country stuff, it sounds more like Southern rock or rocky stuff. So, maybe you'd want a Marshall amp on the session, or maybe you'd want something with humbuckers or whatever. But listen to what the music is if you can, so that you know what to bring on it. Like sometimes I have an old Jubilee, Marshall Jubilee, that's a great sounding old Marshall. Sometimes I'll bring that for a session, but it's sort of a one-trick pony amp. I have an old Fender 66 Vibrolux that I've done probably hundreds of sessions with. I like that one because I can do a lot of different stuff with it. It won't sound like a Marshall, but I can get it to sound like just about everything else. Sometimes if I'm doing worship sessions or something like that, or like contemporary, alt rock type of stuff, I have a good Voxy type of amp that I'll bring on a session because I can really get that like blizzard of nails and punch it pretty hard, make the thing sound nasty. Your basic pedals, these are ones that you probably want for any hired gun session. You want a good compressor. You want a good power supply. Make sure your stuff is not hummy. You don't want a cheap power supply that you go into, especially if you're going into a place that you're not used to and all of a sudden you've got a nasty hum you can't get rid of. That's a big problem. Have a good volume pedal, one that is not a tone-sucking volume pedal. It might need a buffer in it. Check it out. Make sure that you have a good volume pedal. You want at least one good distortion pedal. A lot of times I'll do a multi-stage pedal or several pedals. So like the full tone full drive is a good one because it can go from pretty hot distortion to almost barely any distortion at all for like some sort of cleans with a little bit of hair to them. Or you might use like an OCD pedal from full tone also that's sort of like a more Marshall-y sounding thing. A lot of times I'll bring a TS9 type of overdrive pedal that I put into an amp where I just get the amp with a little bit of hair on it. I'll put the TS9 on it and it gets this great, really good recordable sound. Always I have a delay pedal. With a delay pedal, I like a delay pedal that does not have menus for sessions. I like to be able to go through stuff very quickly. So I use a Strymon a lot of times. Like I said, I love the Strymon. It's a fantastic pedal. But I also have a TC Electronic. I think it's called the X4 delay. It's the big blue one with some presets. I like that one because I can quickly dial in settings. Their other one, the small version of that, also sounds really great and is a fairly inexpensive pedal. Or just the regular Boss like DD7 or something like that. Fantastic pedal, easy to dial in, quick settings. I'll go through my pedal board some other time, but those are my basic pedals. I normally will have like maybe 3 different distortions on my board. For the session the other night, I had an Egnator Rebel 30 that has a good distortion channel, a good clean channel, and I used both of those. I used the distortion channel. It's a little bit like gainy, compressed, so I used it for my leads because it was like a southern rock type of leads. So those are the basics. Be prepared. I would say this: if you're doing early sessions, bring more stuff than you need. Bring pedals you might not think you need. Leave them out in the car. It doesn't matter. But don't be stuck without them. You don't want to get on the session and the producer or the artist says that they want something and you're not able to produce that sound. So, even if it's extra guitars, a 12 string or a dobro or nylon string or whatever it is, have those things at your disposal. If you don't know where the session's going, you don't know what you're doing on the session. But always be like a Boy Scout. Be prepared, and it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. You'll never regret being over-prepared and having a little bit more gear in your car than you need. You don't have to bring it all into the session at the time, but you want access to it. And be flexible as possible. Sometimes artists will ask you for a lot of stuff that you're not expecting. You get on the session, you think it's going to go one way, and you realize that the artist is different than what the demos sound like, and they're going in a very different direction. And you need to be able to track with that very quickly and get the sounds that they need sort of in a blink. Because again, they're paying for time. So even if they're just paying you a set fee, they're paying for the studio time, the producer and the engineer probably on the clock time. So you want to be able to move very quickly. And that sort of determines whether or not you get work in the future. If you're a guy who's a Swiss Army knife, you're able to do sessions very quickly and you'll get more and more and more work from that. If you're a guy who's just a one-trick pony and can only do your thing, you'll get called in for that type of session, but you won't get many other sessions. So anyhow, I hope that helps. Hope it gives you a little insight on what to bring on sessions and how to do some early sessions. I'll try to make some other videos later on preparedness on sessions, and maybe I'll walk through my session pedal board also. All right, see you guys.